Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fischer. I am a senior NBA reporter at Yahoo Sports, and I'm joined, as always, by my man, your man, everyone's man, senior NBA writer for Yahoo Sports, Dan Devine. What's going on?
It's the playoffs, Jake. I have a comically oversized mug of coffee that looks sort of like a lighthouse. It's like a little bit ridiculous over here because this is what we need to get through the late games and into the early games and into all the stuff that we've got to do. I'm jacked up. I'm on very little sleep. Let's get nuts.
Is the lighthouse directing all of your takes from the stormy waters of the postseason world onto the sandy shores of Yahoo's website? Is that the metaphor that works here?
That works great for me. Also, we'll use it as an opportunity to shout out Gravy Boat Lighthouse. It's a great Conan sketch. Go look that up on YouTube. Gravy Boat Lighthouse. It's a lighthouse for insane people that you put inside your mashed potatoes. Anyway, the playoffs. We're play-in still right now, but we're barreling toward it, Jake. Let's talk about it.
The play-in push that we have not officially trademarked on this program is over. We're in the play-in. That's what we will be starting off with today on today's episode. Then we're going to do a quick bounce around all 8 playoff series. Obviously, not obviously, for those listening, we are recording this on Thursday afternoon, which would be a nice little preview for Friday night's games tomorrow, and then the postseason play in earnest starting Saturday. So we don't officially know the 1-8 matchups yet, but we can kind of touch on what Milwaukee and Denver will likely be seeing regardless of outcome here. Let's get to I have a quick little thing I want to throw your way as a segue into the play-in tournament. I'm calling it Takes from the Couch.
Okay.
Because these are things that my girlfriend and I discussed while watching the play-in games this week. They're not really about the NBA, but they are. And one of them's more basketball related. It came up with Karl Anthony Towns, right? 5 fouls, biggest storyline of that game from, I think, the macro perspective. I want to particularly later talk about Anthony Edwards. But I feel, Dan, I'm throwing this out. Mm-hmm. If you have 5, if you have not fouled out everyone on the active, situation, every team gets an extra timeout or 2, right? When we get to overtime, let's give them a 7th foul. If you're already fouled out, it's fine. You're disqualified. But there's 5 more minutes of play. You get 6 fouls for 48 minutes. If you get extra timeouts, why not give an extra foul to extend these? The whole point of these postseason action is to have the stars on the court when the game matters. If Cat had a 7th, if everyone else had it, LeBron was in foul trouble, right? At a certain point, they all could have gotten a 7th foul. Wouldn't that benefit all parties involved?
Sure. I'm not 100% opposed to that, but I do kind of think that's part of becoming the best players in a circumstance is learning how to play through all that stuff, right? Karl Anthony Towns got taken out of the game not because he picked up a 6th foul, but because he was playing like he didn't know how to play with 5 fouls. He was playing like he didn't want to attack. He didn't want to...
Even though he was in that situation in the exact same format a year ago?
Yes, you should have a little bit of experience with this, Carl, because you had a whisper quiet play-in game for the exact same purpose. And so that's on Karl Towns. That's up to him. If you want to be the guy who is going to be able to carry your team through these difficult situations, you've got to learn how to play with that. And it's up to coaches too, right? We've seen coaches so many times prematurely foul their own guys out by leaving them on the bench too long because they got 5, because God forbid they pick up a 6th. I get what you're saying, but also the reason that you have boundaries sometimes is to enforce or to sort of spur greater creativity and to have consequences for what happens before up to that point. So I'm not opposed to this take, but I do think that if you learning how to color within the lines is kind of important too.
I agree. All right. Interesting. So the silly one from my lady friend who doesn't really know what's going on as she's watching the TV. She did not know what LAL stood for. She said, Why isn't it LAX? Why aren't the team's little abbreviations on the scoring chyron airport codes? To be fair, last night, New Orleans, she did not know what NO meant either. And I said, it says New Orleans in all caps at mid-court. And she said, well, that should be the airport code. And I countered with, do you know the airport code of New Orleans? And she said she didn't. I said, it's MSY. So I don't think that would help you either. Do you have any complaints or any thoughts on how we abbreviate team names on the bottom of the screen?
I mean, the easy answer, of course, for LY, it's LAL, is because there's two LA teams and it's LA Lakers and LA Clippers. Yeah. So you have to differentiate them somehow.
To be clear,
but
I did tell her that.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, you're a reporter and you deliver information professionally. I screw that up all the time with Portland because it's PDX, right? And for some reason, whenever I'm like taking notes, I write down PDX instead of POR. And then Phoenix maybe too, or I don't know. I screw up some of them. I think it's a completely reasonable take that in some cases, like New Orleans, probably wouldn't help so much. Although also like just seeing no over and over again as the Pelicans let a game get away, maybe MSY. Although MSY would have been like it's getting messy for them, so maybe that wouldn't have been so good either.
And NOP is a little bit like close to nope. Which
right. There's a lot of ways this doesn't work out well for the Pelicans.
Yeah, outside of Brandon Ingram, there was a lot of nope for the last couple weeks for the Pelicans, as our editor, Joe Garza, who continues to get shout-outs on this program, as he has been very keen on pointing out to us. So to the games really quickly, Hawks Heat, I think, really surprised a lot of people. I saw one of your brilliant tweets, as always, saying, hey, this looks a lot like the team that was with top 5 offense since Quinn Snyder came into town versus a team that hasn't been able to score all season long. I mean, I'll take it from like the aftermath, like big win for Atlanta, for a franchise that does have all these kind of question marks hanging over it, where there's staffing changes going on right now in the front office. They are definitely expected to be continued staffing changes on the coaching staff once this comes to a real close at some point in time here. Camera kept panning to Landry Fields and Kyle Korver and the new leadership of the Hawks in the stands with Tony Ressler there. So to have a big kind of steel road win on national TV, that momentum against Boston, who knows how that series will go. We'll talk about that after the break. I think that, to me, was a bigger win for Atlanta than it was for a loss for Miami. We'll see what the stakes are and the ramifications with the Heat, depending on what happens tomorrow night on Friday. What say you about what you witnessed from, I forget even what the new arena name is, but I did take note that it was no longer FTX Arena on the court.
Yeah, got that out the paint. I don't remember the name of the arena either. There wasn't honestly very much that was memorable for the Heat. I might even, like, with the exception of two sort of notable things for the Hawks I just want to hit on, which is they got up 41 threes in that game. And that was like, if you want to look at where the differentiating point of we're moving from a Nate McMillan offense to we're moving to a Quinn Snyder offense, I think they averaged about 33 pointers a game under Nate McMillan, which is right down the bottom of the league. The emphasis on, like, we have this talent, we have better spacers, we can find ways to create better shots on offense. Let's do it. That's, you sort of saw that coming to the forefront against Miami, and the Heat had a really hard time dealing with it defensively. And then the other part is the Hawks have been a much better offensive rebounding team over the last couple of months. And that was obviously super duper on display. Clint Capella, I think, had 8 offensive rebounds. As a team, I think they had 22 on 51 misses, like a ridiculous offensive rebounding rate. And there were points where the Heat looked like the JV playing against the varsity, where it's like, oh, there's just a bigger guy who can jump higher coming over the top to get the ball on almost all of these possessions. And some of that, some of that is just that the Heat are a smaller team. We'll get into that. But like, this is the talent level and the collection of players who all can do multiple things well that led people to think that the Hawks had a chance to be much better than a 500 team this season. And I mean, it's a better late than never situation. I mean, for the good that it does you're absolutely right. It's an important win, because if they lost and went out with a bad taste in their mouth, that could have been, a lot more furniture moving around this summer. But it does get you the benefit of a first round series against a really good Celtics team. So like they might not linger much longer in the postseason, but at least you saw some proof of concept of this is what a Quinn Snyder-ized version of this team can be. And it gave the Heat a hell of a lot of problems.
I think it makes sense to just stick in the East. And my Bulls, which me calling them the best defense in the league, was blasted across TNT and the NBA app from a lovely commercial from our video staff. That was cut from me. Diehard listeners of the show will know that I said the best defense since the All-Star break at like a time 3 weeks ago. But my Bulls, Patrick Beverley, undefeated in playing games. DeMar DeRozan's daughter screeching.
Wow.
Listen, I failed this program. I woke up this morning with a goal of calling Mr. Whammy. I procured his contact info, and I wanted to get an official statement from Mr. Whammy about DeAr DeRozan's free throw chicanery. I ran out of time. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I've let you down. I've let John Gennaro behind the glass down. I've let all our listeners down. This is the type of inside information that I feel like I'm paid to bring to the public. I'm sorry I could not get that. But what a performance from the young DeRozan. Just intimidating all comers at the free throw line. Can they beat the Heat? Do you think my Bulls, Zach LaVine going, I mean, honestly, a vintage Zach LaVine performance, like when he is playing with that type of look in his eye of I'm coming to kill whatever's in my path, I'm going to attack the rim to the point where it's going to open up all the step back jumpers that I like to fall in love with a little bit too much on a random Wednesday night in the regular season. I mean, that's the dude that Chicago wanted to go out and trade for DeMar DeRozan and Nick Vucevic and sign Lonzo Ball to surround. So they don't have Lonzo, of course, but Caruso and Pat Bev are bringing it on defense at the perimeter. What say you? Can they beat the Heat?
Absolutely. I mean, they beat the Heat 3 times in the regular season. They scored 118.3 points per 100 possessions against the Heat during the regular season. So like a Heat team that struggles to score and has struggled to score all year and has made its bones on defense has really had a hard time stopping Chicago's offense. And I think the biggest thing, you know, as you talk about what Zach LaVine was able to do against Toronto, and especially in that second half, he's healthy, right? It looks like a guy who his knee is all the way back and he trusts it. And that was the issue at the end of last season when he underwent the surgery, the beginning of this season when it seemed like he was kind of having a hard time getting his burst back, getting that flow back. It looks like it's all there, and it has looked like it's all there for a while. 27 points a game since the All-Star break, 53% shooting. Like, this is the guy that was a legitimate All-Star a couple of seasons ago, and he can be the best player on the floor in a game against Miami, especially if Jimmy Butler is the best player of that collection. But Jimmy Butler was supposed to be the best player on the floor against Atlanta and missed, 31 bunnies and had a really hard time finishing on the interior. And while the rim protection in Chicago is much different than Clint Capella in Atlanta, if Jimmy Butler's not the best player in that game, they could absolutely go lose, because I don't imagine you're going to get another 30-plus point game from Kyle Lowry. And these things that have ailed Miami throughout this season, lack of three-point shooting, lack of size, lack of other bankable creators past Tyler Hero, who is a trick-or-treat player in his own right, had a really rough first half, had a good start to the third quarter, but that was kind of about it. If you don't get more from elsewhere, and Jimmy isn't, all NBA second team caliber guy who's going to will you to 27, 8-8 or whatever, the Bulls can absolutely win that. And it would be a dramatic disappointment for the Heat, given where they were a shot away maybe from the finals last year, to go all the way down to maybe not even making the top 8.
It was super ironic to me that Kyle Lowry was the saving grace for the Heat after an entire deadline window where everyone in the league was talking about, oh, Miami hates Kyle Lowry. Miami wants to trade Kyle Lowry. The contract's bad, blah, 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 blah. And he was everything they needed him to be and everything that contract. And again, I'm not reporting that Miami hates Kyle Lowry. That's just the echo chamber.
Let's clarify that. Yeah.
That's the echo chamber rumory voice where people like to turn maybe a pearl of intel and blow it into a mountain of disgust from a team that's just like, hey, he might be like a little bit worse than we bargained for.
Sure.
But he was definitely a lot worse than they bargained for throughout much of the season, definitely in terms of like health and availability. And he delivered, man. Kyle Lowry did Kyle Lowry things. Anthony Edwards did not do Anthony Edwards things against the Los Angeles Lakers. And I haven't spent like hours upon hours with Anthony Edwards. I've talked to the guy multiple times at length for stories. Most recently in December when I was in Oklahoma City, we had like 15, 20 minutes together, which might not sound like so at length, but honestly, in an NBA Access World 2023, that's like a eternity.
Yeah.
The dude oozes confidence. He, to the point where he even said to me, like unprompted, like, to be clear, like, I'm not cocky, I'm confident. Like, no one thinks I have like an attitude problem, which I'm not. No one does. I mean, the Timberwolves ride for Anthony Edwards to the point where, because they believe in all of his talent and all of his what goes on between his ears is the like rare combination of superstars that are going to deliver time and time again. The fact that he wasn't even looking at the rim for like the big spell that they had in the fourth quarter, where I think it was upwards of 5 minutes they didn't score, stuck on 95 points at the end of regulation. It was just like, what the heck was that, man? Like, I mean, the defense, he brought it. The shot blocking at the rim, rebounding, he was there. But when Cat's doing whatever Cat's doing, struggling with foul trouble, and Chris Finch has to go to an all bench lineup because like he doesn't really believe that Anthony Edwards is able to like carry that unit at that point in time. Like, that was to me one of the most head scratching things that I've seen all season, let alone during the play-in games.
Yeah, especially because when Ant's right, when he's at his best, he's basically a straight arrow pointed at the rim, and he can fall in love with 100%. The step. He can fall in love with the step backs. He can fall in love with the pull ups. But when he the pressure he puts on a defense by just that north south juice getting to the rim, it opens up so much else. And he's been improved in leaps and bounds this season in the driving kick game, using that the attention that he draws with those drives to open things up for other guys. And there was so little of that throughout the course of that game. And there's part of it you have to be a little bit careful, where he took that really nasty spill late in the third quarter where he's going up on trying to block a shot and winds up like going over the top of Rui Hachimura, landed on his shoulder. Maybe that impacted how he felt or what he was, how confident he was pulling up or driving for the rest of the game down through that fourth quarter and overtime stretch. But you can't excuse, he was really struggling before that too. He was 1 for 8 from the field and 0 for 5 from 3 before he got to that collision. So, which is not what they need from him, obviously. And it's also not what we saw from him in his maiden voyage in the postseason last year against the Grizzlies, where he stepped on the court confident that he was going to be able to be the best player in that series from the jump. If that's not there for this version of the Wolves, especially with Karl Anthony Towns being somebody that can be difficult to bank on at times, especially with Rudy Gobert, maybe he's back Friday, but then Jaden McDaniels is not going to be back. And there's the resultant shuffle from there. Maybe you're, again, like we were talking about with Lowry, maybe you're not going to get the same kind of Michael Conley game that you got against the Lakers. So much more is needed from Anthony Edwards. For him to lay an egg like that in the most important game of their season was surprising and I think probably troubling. But what you'd have to bank on if you're a Wolves fan or if you're within that Wolves front office is the stuff that you're talking about, that level of confidence, the between the ears stuff to say he's going to flush the one that didn't go well and he's going to come out loaded for bear and looking to hang 40 in the final play-in game here to make sure we make it to the next round. Because when he's got it all going, he's absolutely capable of being the best perimeter player, even on a floor with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on it.
How dare you doubt Mike Conley? No, I agree. It's look, without having Jaden McDaniels, that's going to be a big monkey wrench in guarding Shai. Mm-hmm. And Giddey's another large, let's say, on-ball playmaker.
Sure.
That they're not going to have a 6'7" dude with a 7-foot wingspan to try to defend. And Ant is going to be tasked with guarding somebody of substance, even more so than he would have if McDaniels was active, and that's probably going to sap. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe from conversations I've had with people on the Wolves, like playoff Ant that they saw, to your point earlier, was someone they've been waiting to see kind of on a consistent basis all season long. And maybe that's something that he wasn't able to consistently bring in that, individual environment, and something that is going to be super important against the Thunder, because the Thunder are coming. We've been kind of really championing OKC and the Fighting Mark Danganauts on this program. And seemed like they pretty simply out-coached and outmaneuvered and just outed New Orleans. It was a close game, but sitting here in Brooklyn, I didn't really feel like it wasn't going to end up with a Thunder victory. Maybe that's just by bias, believing in what the Thunder are building here. Did you have any different perspective as that game was hanging in the balance, and what did you take from that performance from OKC that you think could potentially help them beat Minnesota come tomorrow evening?
Yeah, I think the big thing to take away from Oklahoma City's perspective is that, or there's a few, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting off to a rocky start did not derail him at all. That guy is like metronome consistent, and he's going to get to his level. He's going to get to his shots. The shot that on the move pull up that he hit, taking the contact from Herb Jones, then that soft touch over the top, that is like a 99th percentile difficulty move to make and hit, let alone with like a minute and a half to go in an elimination game. And it looked like his heart rate didn't change.
Yeah.
Like, so
the level reminded me of that just quickly. I keep interrupting you today. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Reminding me of that shot that KD had game 2 of the finals where he got fouled by LeBron, didn't get the call. Like, it was very similar.
Oh, yeah. That Thunder Heat series, right? Yeah. But for him to make that on the run and then go, that kind of calming influence, that's important for a young team. And Josh Giddey mentioned that after the game. He said, like when you see that guy stay calm, like your number one guy stays calm, it kind of filters through to everybody else. And, then Josh Giddey goes out and was it like almost a 30-point triple double when you had Herb Jones as sort of like the lockdown defender on SGA. We need somebody else to initiate a lot. Well, the cool thing about the way the Thunder are built is that they've got a couple of those guys. And it's obviously not nearly on the level of when you had like Durant, Westbrook, and Harden, but when you have multiple wing initiators, a lot of teams don't have 3 perimeter defenders that they can throw at you like that. So you're going to find a matchup you like, and they kept finding it with Giddey. The issue that you take that forward into a matchup with the Wolves, as you said, no Jaden McDaniels means Ant's going to have to guard some of those guys. And there are options there with the size that they can play with on the wing. And, as Kyle Anderson, he's able to guard multiple positions. There's a few players that you can sort of throw out there, but they're going to be able to play whack-a-mole a little bit. And I think find matchups they like with that perimeter core. The concern you'd have for Oklahoma City, it's the one thing they're missing is the guy who's on the bench, right? When you are playing a comparatively undersized center in Arkansas Jalen Williams, you can get mauled on the glass. And Jonas Valanciunas was feasting in that first half, putbacks, little sort of short half hooks in the paint. And it seemed like that was a money source of offense for New Orleans. Now, one of the stories of New Orleans this season was like they kept going away from that. And whether that's Willie Green or that's the guards or whatever else, they just did not consistently hammer that physical advantage. If you were talking about going up against Minnesota with Gobert on the inside or Towns, if he's able to play more out of the post, that size advantage and that offensive advantage in the interior over Jalen Williams, he'll stand in there and take charges. He'll contest shots. He's tough, but that's an area where they don't have the great size on the interior. So that's something that Minnesota, you'd imagine, would look to exploit. But I don't think that you look at it and say the Thunder have to go in there feeling absolutely no pressure, feeling like we are absolutely we just went on the road and won one of these. Let's go get another one. We've been a better team, like full stop, since January 1st than this Wolves team, let alone when they've got all the injuries and all the internal drama. Nothing but good vibes coming from Oklahoma City up to Minnesota, and then a lot of anxious vibes with the Wolves. So I think they've got to feel awfully confident, and the Wolves are going to have to say, like, we need our best performance at this moment to be able to just move on.
There you go. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and preview the first round of the NBA playoffs. Welcome back to No Cap Room. We went a little long on playing, so we already had this program, but we're going to try to keep our series previews here to 5 minutes each. A little PTI sound. We're not Kenny and Shaq today. We are Tony and Mike. I don't know which one we are, but that's up to the listeners to decide. A horn will sound every 5 minutes, and then we will move on. We will start in Denver, where the Thunder or the Timberwolves that we were just discussing will take on the top-seeded Denver Nuggets. I am kind of rooting. I'm a unbiased reporter, but I'm kind of rooting for the Thunder to make the 8 seed and give Denver a run for their money. I just think what they did to New Orleans, what they've been doing since January 1st, as you alluded to, just coming in waves with a deep, long two-way group will potentially really bring out the issues of Denver's lack of depth. I mean, you only really need 7 to 8 guys in the postseason traditionally to get a wire-to-wire victory game after game after game. But would either of OKC or Minnesota, from your standpoint, give Denver problems to the point where we could see a Titan fall very early in the Western Conference playoff picture?
I don't know that I think either one of them would win a series against the Nuggets. Although it's worth noting the Nuggets comparatively are one of the weaker 1 seeds that the West has seen in a while. That's the nature of this year's West, that's a little bit down in terms of this, like the top tier, how effective they've been all season. And the Nuggets' defensive issues come into play there, that they've been, an average at best defense for most of the season. And, what you can do in terms of their perimeter stoppers. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is good. Bruce Brown is good. You, again, maybe don't have quite the upper level stoppers to deal with SGA or Ant, so on down the list. I think the interior matchups that we were talking about, where I was saying I'm not sure that the center rotation of Arkansas, Jalen Williams, and Dario Saric is going to be able to deal with Jokic. I feel like if Jonas Valanciunas was giving them problems, then you just kind of imagine Jokic eating them alive, either by mauling his way to the front of the rim and shooting 70% within 8 feet, or demanding that extra help and then just picking you apart, passing out of the post. So I think that because Denver runs its offense through its big man in that way, I kind of feel like that would be a schematic issue for Oklahoma City. Whereas the Thunder, or the Wolves rather, at least Gobert doesn't really give Jokic there aren't many people that give Jokic problems, but Gobert, at least positionally, is a size and length matchup and a strength matchup that could be a little bit more formidable there. And on the other end, Towns could maybe drag him out to the perimeter more. He's a little bit more of an offensive threat. So I think the Wolves, maybe matchup wise, are posed more of a threat, but in terms of just like overall team quality and where they've been for a little while, Oklahoma City's has been playing flat out better. So I don't know that I would pick either of them to make the big 1-8 upset that we've seen pretty rarely in recent NBA history. But I think it's worth being at least mindful of, this 1 seed in the West is not what other 1 seeds in the West have been. So if you're going to see that sprung, this wouldn't necessarily be the most shocking set of circumstances for it, though I probably wouldn't pick it.
I could just see, Denver had that stretch where they came through New York. I think it was end of March, where they lost, 4 in a row, messed around, dropped 6 of 8. They kind of took their eye off the ball. They were miles ahead of the competition, the number 1 seed. They've just shown the ability to take their foot off the gas a little bit and maybe overlook the team across the aisle. And the Thunder have a makeup of, if you do that, we are going to make you pay for it. To the point where I don't know. I'm not here saying that I'm predicting the Thunder to beat Minnesota and to knock off the Wolves, but can they make it way scarier and way harder of a fight than Denver, rolled the Western Conference in order to get that 1 seed for? I think so. I think it could really be a massive momentum piece for them moving into an offseason where they're going to get Chet Holmgren back. They're going to get other top picks coming into play, and they have some cap space that maybe they can do some things with.
I would agree with that. I think no matter what, the Thunder are super in house money territory for all the reasons you just mentioned. And I think that if they're able to make it into that 1-8 series it's somewhat of a parallel with Memphis a few years ago. They get into that 1-8 series against Utah. They win 1 game early, and there's oh my God, is this going to be the, where it all turns around? Utah, lays the hammer down. Memphis is out pretty quickly. But that, initial taste of postseason play for John Morant, for Dylan Brooks, for the rest of that core, kind of set the table for the year-over-year growth. I think you could see something similar happening with Oklahoma City, but it just... there we go.
Any thought to finish, or just move it along?
Jokic absolutely cannot go out in round 1. Cannot.
There you go. Grizzlies, Lakers. Start the clock. We know the Grizzlies have wanted this matchup. At least Dylan Brooks did. It's a Shannon Sharp bowl. We'll see if any courtside shenanigans are to rear their ugly heads once again. Rear its ugly head. Who knows?
It's fine.
I have here in my notes, I did not write this. Memphis feels like a race car that is trying to cross the finish line before the engine explodes.
Damn, John Gennaro.
Look at that. Will they make it? Will they make it?
So I wrote a preview of this series for Yahoo Sports. It's up on the website. And my pick, if I remember right from the wee small hours of last night, was Grizzlies in 6. I think so. I think part of it is we have a tendency to, maybe over-index what we've seen most recently. And the Lakers have been one of the better teams in the league since the trade deadline, the dramatic revamping of the roster with D'Angelo Russell coming in and Jared Vanderbilt and yada, 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 Russell Westbrook going out. And the defense has been awesome. They've gotten LeBron back with the starting lineup, which has Austin Reeves in it, the numbers have been through the roof. But when you saw the way that the Lakers looked for the first 3 quarters of that game against the Wolves, you're like, oh, right. This is a team that was 13th like a month and a half ago that had to have 4 or 5 teams ahead of them basically just like fall down and drop all of their papers on the floor.
Looking at you, Portland. Looking at you.
Yeah. And Utah gracefully bowing out of the discussion over the last couple of weeks. Like a lot of stuff had to go right for them to get even to 7. And you're like, they will struggle to score at times. The defense should travel, but you wind up going like, all right, well, how do they match up with Ja Morant? Right? Their best defensive chance against Ja is probably Dennis Schroeder, who defended him most during the regular season and is the sort of the best quickness matchup for him. He's coming off the bench because they like the way that the Russell and Reeves look works out on offense. And I think Ja's going to eat either one of those guys alive at the point of attack.
Russell's not known to be a defensive stalwart.
It's not his ace skill set. It's not like his number one thing, the badge, whatever, like the badge you would get in 2K. It's not like we're the first one that pops up for him. So then the downstream effects from there. So and the Grizzlies have challenges, right? No Steven Adams, no Brandon Clark. Anthony Davis should be in position to have a really strong series. How do they match up? If Jaren Jackson Jr. gets into foul trouble, which is like the big caveat for every Memphis conversation you have, how do they match up? But Xavier Tillman has played Anthony Davis pretty well. He's been really good in that Steven Adams role. They have some answers there. I think they have enough answers to get past this Lakers team. They might not be a full-fledged contender, but I think that they've got enough to get out of round 1. And I think that the Lakers, we've maybe overrated a little bit what they've been based on recency bias.
I'm not reporting anything here.
It's really good. I love that preface that where like you're about to say something wild, but you have to make sure that nobody thinks
it's not wild.
Okay.
I'm not ready to just write off that Steven Adams isn't coming back in the postseason either. He's doing too much pregame on-court workout looking like Steven Adams to just whisk him away into the confines of our subconscious and eliminate him from our reality of potential postseason characters.
Sorry, that's all that sounded like that was like either therapy talk or Marvel Cinematic Universe talk. We're whisking him away to our subconscious. First off, I like imagining the idea that I have like a little Steven Adams in the back of my head, trying to calm me down or spur me forward depending on what the case requires. And then also the idea that we're eliminating him from reality. I don't like that. I don't want that at all. But Adams is a really important piece. And there's people that I think look at him and say, well, he got played off the floor against Minnesota last year. And so like, how important is he? They're going to have to deal with centers in this postseason run. They're going to have to deal with big guys. And what Adams does as a screen setter, as an offensive rebounder, as a box out guy that clears the path so Ja or Desmond Bane or whoever can grab the ball and go. He does a lot of really important stuff. And a Grizzlies team that doesn't shoot like awesome needs as many second chance opportunities as they can get. So if they're able to get him back on the court in any capacity, it would be a huge development for them. I wouldn't anticipate it in this series, but I still do think that with Tillman and Jaren Jackson Jr. and some of the guys that they're able to get together on the wing, I think they've got enough to still get past these Lakers.
There you go. We're beating the horn. We're beating the buzzer. We are moving.
Do you have any hot Lakers takes? We got some time, apparently.
No, let's keep it moving. The Lakers aren't good. They're not bad, but they're not good. There's my.
He doesn't have any hot Lakers takes, but they're not good. All right, let's put that on the bulletin boards in Los Angeles.
They're not good. They are not gonna make the people who are out here thinking they're gonna make a run to the Western Conference Finals, let alone the finals. What are you watching? What are you watching?
They're watching the Austin Reeves toe drag. Putting the brakes on, getting those floaters up, getting to the foul line.
I love Austin Reeves. He's going to get paid. Shout out Austin Reeves.
Absolutely. And well, he should.
The Lakers are not good. They're not bad, but they're not good. Kings Warriors, I think, has a shot at being, and there's a lot of these series I think have a shot at being the proverbial best series of the first round. But the synergy of the coaching staffs, Mike Brown pulling a bunch of Warriors people with him, the fact that they're so close that beat writers for both teams seem to just pop up at either arena on a whim because they're within an hour plus of driving with each other. The like big city tech bro versus the cow tipping stuff. The cowbells. I need the cowbells out in full force. The atmosphere is going to be insane. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be lusting for the beam in Sacramento. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch a Sabonis versus Draymond matchup. Steph's going to Steph. There's also just, I don't want to talk about it too much. It's something I want to make more calls on and maybe look into later on. There's some potential last dancey vibes here for Golden State with Bob Myers' contract looming, Draymond potentially being able to opt out. I mean, he does have the potential to opt out. Steve Kerr in the waning years of his NBA coaching career, Steph Curry getting older, Klay Thompson, I think, only has 1 year left on his deal after this. If it's not one, it's like he's in the back half of his contract. There's stuff at stake. It's going to be a lot of points. Which team is going to be able to defend the other is probably going to what this comes down to. Is that are you looking at this from any other standpoint in terms of a tactical matchup?
No, I think that if it comes down to a question of who do you trust to guard more in the series, how do you go against the team that has Draymond Green on it, right? How do you go against the team where you're counting the rings, right? Exactly. How do you go
That's
against
for our
the
YouTube
team?
watchers?
There you go. Appreciate that, everybody. How do you go against a team that, when they have Andrew Wiggins back on the floor, which it looks like by all accounts they're going to, has consistently been an elite defense, with that starting lineup? It's interesting, you mentioned the Sabonis versus Draymond matchup. This is the time of year where we routinely remember how important Kevon Looney is, right? Like that Looney, I think they're going to trust Looney to play him straight up. And they're going to say, we're going to start with that matchup, our 5 on your 5, and we're going to let Draymond kind of, whether it's on Harrison Barnes or on Keegan Murray or on whoever, let him play sort of free safety off the ball a little bit and let those guys, make them prove it. Let Draymond sort of try to put out fires or start fires in other places and make those other guys, the forwards, prove it. And I think that's a dangerous game to be in if you're Sacramento, because what Sabonis as a dribble handoff hub has been the heart of everything that they've done. And it's going to put a lot of emphasis for Klay Thompson and Steph Curry on chasing all those shooters around, right? Putting on, can they get Kevin Huerter? Can they stay attached to him? Can they stay attached to De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk? But if you get Wiggins back, Wiggins guards Fox because he's going to guard the number one perimeter option on everything else. They think they trust Looney on Sabonis. Draymond just flying around. It feels like a way to snuff out all that motion, because who knows that motion stuff better than Golden State? I feel like we're in a position where we've been super duper pro Sacramento boosters on this show. And now I'm in a position of having to be like, sorry guys, I don't think it's going to work out, but
no,
it is
I don't either.
to me, the worst matchup they could have drawn in 3-6. And I'm going to, I've said this before, if you're telling me the Warriors are at full strength going into the playoffs, I am not picking against them until I am proven wrong. And this is a perfect storm for that. So Sacramento might win some games like 150 to 143, and that would be awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. But if you're asking me who I trust that Golden State core to be able to clamp down when they need to.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering what happens when one of the faucets gets turned off, right? Mm-hmm. If that DHO action, I mean, I remember when I wrote about Kevin Huerter a couple of weeks back, I was asking some opposing coaches about all the DHO stuff, and maybe it's just a bit of hubris and belief in what these guys do for a living, but there was definitely plenty of talk from opposing coaches I spoke with, like that they're not easy, but very feasible ways to kind of thwart a lot of what Sacramento has done from a consistent basis in a 7-game series. So I'm more skeptical than those rivals, being that it's the greatest offense in NBA history. But I mean, the defense, I think, is the scariest part, and when we've talked about it, it's what Sacramento people are talking about themselves. They know that, but they've been battle tested in close games all season long. They've figured out ways to get stops. There you go. There's the buzzer. It's going to be a great series. The biggest rival, I think, for Sac Golden State in terms of best first round series is the last one we have not talked about. Suns Clippers 4-5, super team versus super team. Although Paul, there you go.
Without Paul George, it's super team versus pretty good team.
It does lack its luster without Paul George. And that's kind of been the story of this Clippers era, right? There's all of this speculation and talk about what's at stake for the other LA team moving into a new building, potential changeover personnel-wise without a certain stretch deep into the postseason. Who knows what that benchmark will be? Who knows if there even is? There's just been so much. I mean, you lose Kawhi to ACL. Paul George misses plenty of time last year. He's missed some postseason games. Like, that's kind of just been what the MO of these Clippers have been.
It's just they've been consistently difficult to bank on. And the Suns, obviously, they've only had 8 games with Kevin Durant since he got there. But what they've shown has been pretty friggin' impressive in those 8 games. They haven't lost one of them. That's a pretty good start. If you haven't lost any of the games when you've got your guy in it, they're plus 70 in 180 minutes with Durant and Booker on the floor. They're going to be on the floor together a lot, you'd imagine, in the playoffs. They are outscoring teams by almost 20 points per 100 possessions with Booker, Durant, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton on the floor. Again, you'd expect a lot of that in the playoffs, provided health. It's just, if you had Paul George, you would have 2 elite wing defenders to throw at whatever Phoenix wants to do. Without him, you have Kawhi, who you they don't be given the role he's going to have to play offensively. They're probably not going to want to lock him on Durant for 40 minutes. So then everybody else has a bigger job. And it's like, Nick Batum is really good and in his role. Which one do you feel more confident in having a big series, Kevin Durant or Nick Batum, right? So I will admit that that's not a fair comparison, right? But it's where you're left. And where we are now with Paul George, the most recent thing that the Clippers have said was before their game Saturday, he's undergoing exercises and therapies to rehabilitate his sprained knee. No timetable for his return. Shams Charania of The Athletic reported Monday he's expected to miss the start of the series, but he's making some tangible progress. That's wonderful. And if we get to see him at some point in the series, that might tilt the math. But at this stage, like, just what the Clippers are and have been doesn't feel like enough to deal with what's coming their way.
The absence of Paul George, though, hear me out.
Okay.
Is it setting the stage for the Kevin Durant versus Russell Westbrook series that we've all wanted and deserved? Westbrook, in 21 games with the Clippers, highest field goal percentage of his career, highest 3-point percentage of his career, lowest turnovers of his career. Is this going to be KD versus Russ?
I mean, like, yes, literally, strictly speaking from a literal perspective, yes, one will be on one team and one will be on the other. But, and all credit to Russell Westbrook and to the Clippers for creating an environment where he can thrive and to him for thriving in it. I think a lot of people, myself included, were skeptical about the addition of him at the buyout deadline, and he's been fantastic.
Even the Clippers front office, by all accounts, they were skeptical. Without Paul George driving the train, I don't know if he'd be there.
Right, and he has been everything they could have asked him to be in that starting role since he got there. But I think if this boils down to Russ trying to go one-on-one with KD or trying to out-duel KD, I think that means very bad things for the Clippers, and I think it probably augurs a short series. But one thing I want to throw at you is it's the sort of lower, it's not as interesting narratively maybe, and it's more of a lower key thing. But this is also like the KD Kawhi matchup that we haven't gotten the last couple of times we've had the opportunity for it. They've been playing against one another in the playoffs since 2012, that Spurs Thunder series. And the last couple of times we've seen them, it was kind of before Kawhi was really like capital K Kawhi. I guess there's always a capital letter at the start of a name. But
I got what you're saying.
But
remember when I coined the Terminator? That's when he became Capital
Of course,
K-Claw.
that's right. You're working the night desk, learning about New York real estate, and you coined the Terminator. But the last couple times that they've matched up in the playoffs, so that Spurs Warriors series, the first KD Warriors year, halfway through the first game, Kawhi was annihilating the Warriors, and then Zaza Pachulia slips his foot underneath on the closeout, changes the rules of the NBA moving forward, and knocks Kawhi out for a year. He barely plays in San Antonio the rest of the way. He gets to Toronto, the 2019 finals, Raptors versus Warriors. KD's got the calf strain, comes back, winds up rupturing his Achilles, barely plays in that game in that series, knocks him out of the next year, moves him to Brooklyn. Everything starts changing from there. So we haven't seen these guys really lock up in a series in a decade. And so I think the opportunity
Lawrence.
Yeah, 2 top 75 players of all time, right? 2 of the best small forwards their generation, 2 perennial all-NBA caliber guys, 2 MVP candidates, 2 of the 12 players in NBA history with multiple finals MVPs, and we're going to get to see them go heads up. Like, that's kind of a cool thing for a first-round series, even if it feels a little bit weird and like buried in the context of a 4-5 matchup where we're thinking maybe more about who isn't here or what might not be part of it than what is. Oh my God, right go. At the buzzer.
Look at that. All they need is one game of 40 versus 40, and we'll be talking all about KD.
Absolutely.
We're switching it to the East. Try to keep it moving here. We need to keep it moving. Bucks versus Bulls /Heat. I'm just going to say it right now. I don't give a shit who wins. I don't care if it's Bulls. I don't care if they're my Bulls. Milwaukee.
The abandonment, the immediate abandonment of his Bulls. Incredible.
I mean, you had Bobby Portis on the podcast. He was lovely.
He was.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, I chatted with for a video segment while my family was on vacation, and we were checking into for my mother's birthday, and we were checking into a hotel room, and I like scrambled to get the Wi-Fi info, and I was all flustered, and he was just so polite and so Giannis and so thoughtful. And also, he is taken all that contemplativeness and turned it into being an absolute machine for the last half decade. The Bucks are sweeping this series. I'm calling it right now. I don't care who wins the 8 matchup. Milwaukee is coming with a vengeance. It's a sweep. I'm calling it right now. Maybe disagree with me. Maybe create some type of argument why it's not going to happen. But I don't know. The floor is yours.
I think, might be gentleman's sweepy. The you get up 3, you give 1 back, and then you finish it in 5. Shout out to my friend Graydon Gordian, the first person. You coined the Terminator. You say he definitely coined gentleman's sweep, many blog moons ago.
It's a good term.
It's a great term. And the Bucks beat the Bulls in one of those last year, 5-game sweep. They swept the Heat 2 years ago, when there was that thing because the Heat took out the Bucks in the bubble, and it was, is this going to be the end of the line for Mike Budenholzer? Oh no, the first round matchup again. How are they going to square off? And then the Bucks absolutely just dismantled the Heat. We're like, we solved you. We are not worried about Bam Adebayo. We are not worried about Jimmy Butler. We have exactly what we need to take you guys out. And I think this Bucks team is maybe better than either one of those last 2. So I agree with you. Whoever winds up coming out of the last play-in matchup, I don't think they stand much of a chance here. And I think the Bucks are going to be on to bigger and better things pretty quickly. And I don't know if we're going to be able to have time to get Giannis or Bobby back on the show, but certainly open invitation to whatever members of the Bucks would like to come on if they've got a little bit of time off between their first round series and their second.
I would love to talk to Jay Crowder just on the podcast, being that when we chatted in the locker room in Brooklyn after the trade deadline, he was just unfettered and honest in the spirit of the title of the show. So he'd be great. Right. He'd be talking junk about whoever they're playing. Jay Crowder specifically, if you'd like to come on the show, let us know. Jay Crowder's old team, the Boston Celtics, playing
Segway King, ladies and gentlemen.
Playing against the now number 7 seeded Atlanta Hawks, who were a team that was in the mix trying to acquire Jay Crowder back before the deadline buzzer sounded. The Hawks, they've got the offensive firepower, potentially. I mean, they do, to keep up with the Celtics humming offense with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Atlanta, also a team that often rumored a potential landing spot for Jaylen Brown if things were ever to go awry or amiss in that Boston tandem. He is an Atlanta native, for those who are uninitiated with that. I think that will be something that gets rippled beneath the current here of the series. I also, though, I'm not like here pounding the table for Boston over Atlanta like I was about Milwaukee, but I'm not expecting this to be, as much as the Hawks have some momentum here, things are building. I think Boston is kind of, I mean, I haven't talked to anyone with the Celtics, but I feel like they got to be having a little bit of a sigh of relief, not having to go against the team they just played against in the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago in the first round.
Yeah, the ideal version of the Heat is a bit, it presents a lot of problems for Boston. The version of the Heat that we have maybe wouldn't have quite so much, but I get where you're coming from there. The Hawks, I mean, the Celtics are 3-0 against the Hawks this season. People have been in and out of the lineups for those, and so you take so much from them. But the Celtics have outscored them by 13.4 points per 100 when they've played. I don't think they're particularly. I would imagine they're not particularly worried about it. Trae Young is, I believe, averaged better than 30 points and 10 assists against the Celtics this year. Fat lot of good. It did the Hawks, that production. I'm interested to see how, like, the Hawks are kind of sneakily one of the few teams that have a bunch of wings that can maybe physically match up with the guy Tatum and Brown and the Celtics wings, where you've got, DeAndre Hunter and, AJ Griffin is sort of out of the rotation a little bit as a rookie, but like another, 6'6" body there. Jalen Johnson played great in the play-in matchup against Miami. Sadiq Bey, been a nice addition for them since the trade deadline. So there's bodies and size to play with some of those combo forward wings. But the quality of what the Celtics bring to the table is just, it's different. It's a higher level on both ends of the floor. As Robert Williams has looked healthier, he's brought back that verticality, that dimension to the team that made them so dangerous last season. I think there are too many ways that Boston can sort of dismantle what's still not a very good Atlanta defense, and maybe fewer ways for the Trae Young hunting. Like the Celtics got so good in that series, or in the last postseason run, of we're going to figure out our small pick and rolls, Marcus Smart screening, Brogdon screening, Derek White screening, and you're just going to have to deal with Jason Tatum. Like, it's going to be tough for Atlanta to scram him out of those matchups, and I think I would expect those big wings to go to work for Boston. If the Hawks play the way that they did against Miami in this series, I could see them maybe getting a couple, but this going further than 6 would surprise me.
Jalen Johnson, I will say, I'm not expecting him to be a Jason Tatum stopper, but I like Jalen Johnson a lot. When I've tuned into Atlanta the last couple of weeks, he's been the player and the thing about the Hawks that's jumped off the screen to me the most, and he did it again in Miami. He's an interesting young piece they've got in the mix there. We go to Philadelphia. Sixers versus Nets, a matchup of my hometown team versus my current town team. When I was reporting about the James Harden inevitable trade out of Brooklyn to Philly, I had people from Brooklyn complaining that I'm from the Sixers, and I was trying to make that happen. And I had people from Philly complaining that I was an agent of the Nets because I live in Brooklyn, which I thought was hilarious. I was just telling you guys what was going to happen. He wanted to go to Philly. Ben Simmons wanted out. Ben Simmons will not be part of this series, which I'm sure will be litigated on airwaves for the next 2 weeks, and he'll be panned to on the bench wearing some type of outfit.
Yeah, Coogee sweater or something. But like, here's the thing, like, what's left to litigate at this point, right? I mean, he has barely played since he got to Brooklyn. He has barely been effective in the moments that he has played. He is not, he's part of the plans insofar as only like you can only move a boulder but so much without heavy equipment.
I mean, we're doing it right now. There's probably someone somewhere listening saying he's not playing. Why are you talking about Ben Simmons?
Fair point.
He's going to be the elephant in the room. People are going to talk about it.
You know who is going to play and who's going to be the elephant on the court is Joel Hans Embiid.
Oh, yeah. And I love how people with the Nets have just kind of been saying, like, all we have to do is just kind of throw doubles at him, and then like someone else has to beat us. Like, this guy has been putting up 40 all season, and he's gotten better and better at handling those doubles. To me, I don't think this is going to be a close series either. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm going to game 1, taking the Amtrak down the Northeast Corridor to 30th Street, hopping over to South Philly. We're going to check it out. 1:00 start time. Thank you, NBA. league office for scheduling that at the perfect time I needed it to make a day trip out of it. But I'm not truly anticipating too much resistance here. Mikal Bridges has been phenomenal. I really love what Brooklyn did to get past the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving saga and the pieces they have left behind. They are building something that is leaving a lot to be encouraged about, but this is not the series. I mean, the Nets, from conversations, clearly think that they had the luck of the draw, that this is the best possible matchup for them, that it's just a Joel Embiid on the other side. Like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I mean, the issue. So we can, I think, stipulate there is not, with all due respect to Nick Claxton, who had a sensational season, and to that sort of new collection of wings that Brooklyn has to be able to switch everything and to throw a whole lot of different lineup flexibility out there. Joel Embiid just sort of mashes those like a mortar and pestle and grinds them into dust, right? So I think there's no physical matchup for Embiid on the roster. You'd expect Embiid, so long as he stays upright and healthy and without any elbows in his orbital bones, please God, like let the guy get through an opening round series without head trauma. He's going to have an absolute monster series. So the things to watch for to me are, will Brooklyn, with Jacques Vaughn sort of getting in the lab defensively, will they be able to figure out, or how do they want to approach the two-man game, the Harden Embiid two-man game? And we've seen some teams have some success. The Bucks had some success with it, trying to sort of take away the pocket pass, really low, like aggressively low hands. Eric Name at The Athletic wrote about it. Drew Holiday getting his hand down, Giannis getting his hand down when Harden comes off the screen, to try to just make it harder to get the ball to Embiid at the nail. Can Brooklyn have some success with their coverages? Are they going to throw some more zone out there to try to keep him from getting the ball in the middle of the floor? What do they do to try to muck it up and keep Embiid from getting the ball? I don't think it's going to be all that successful, but every strategy another team can bring to bear to try to keep the ball out of his hands bears watching, right? And honestly, to me, the other big thing to watch is what are we getting from James Harden? He's missed a bunch of games down the stretch of the season. There's been some questions about how his legs are, how his all these sorts of things. If he the extended time off, the week between the play-in, does he enter the playoffs looking like he did for the previous couple of months, where he was just absolutely that quarterback, the facilitator, the guy who led the league in assists and who could just set everybody up, set the table for everybody? He doesn't have to be Houston Harden. He doesn't have to be anything like that. If he's healthy, though, and able to, win at the point of attack a little bit, just enough to be able to set the table for everybody else, and, then every entire worlds open up for what Philly could do here. But I think the goal, if you're the Sixers, is Embiid dominates, you get out of this sort of clean and quick, and you get ready for what would be a significant bear of a second round series, likely against Boston.
There you go. This guy, the timing, clutch. He
put me up there for Clutch Player of the Year. Get me that Jerry West award. He's out
always
here.
There to deliver as the clock is ticking down. All right. Our final series to talk about, trying to keep this as close to an hour as we can. Cavs Knicks, the Donovan Mitchell rivalry. If there's one storyline that's going to get blown out of proportion, it's going to be that. Mm-hmm. There's so much more at stake. And this is a rich series full of individual stories. We got Jalen Brunson back in the postseason with his team. He's no longer the second fiddle. Julius Randle coming back from a down season last year, all-star. Tom Thibodeau leading a top 5 offense when he's known to be a defensive guy. The young Cavs, Evan Mobley on the rise. Just a lot. This is going to be a good series. 2 talented teams. They've played each other pretty tightly and contestedly throughout the regular season. If there's a blowout game or there, I don't remember it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember these two teams just clashing and going at it. The Garden's going to be rocking. I'm sure Quicken Loans Arena, not Quicken Loans Arena, it is now Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, I believe.
That's right.
It's going to be bumping as well. Always a great playoff crowd in Northeast Ohio. To me, I think Cleveland's size up front is going to be an interesting challenge for New York and Mitchell Robinson to combat, being that just like Karl Anthony Towns, Foul trouble has been something that has plagued him throughout his career. And there isn't exactly like a wealth of uber athletic, guys on New York's bench. I mean, I love Isaiah Hartenstein, but I think of him more of an offensive hubby, ball mover type guy than someone who can. I mean, he holds his own out there, but switching out in the perimeter and stuff like that is not exactly known to be his strong suit. So, what type of X's and O's chess match here are you preparing for as we get set?
Well, I wrote about this a little bit. I did a preview for this one also at Yahoo Sports, so you can check that out there. I think you're absolutely right. You point to the number one matchup-y kind of thing is just like Mitchell and Brunson. The last time we saw them in the playoffs, it kind of got Brunson like a 9-figure contract, and it landed Mitchell on a different team. So it's a little more complicated than all that, but like. The breakout that led people to believe that maybe Jalen Brunson could be a number one on his own team came against Donovan Mitchell, just sort of torching him repeatedly in the first round of the playoffs. They had a pretty sensational duel a couple weeks ago. Brunson with a career high 48, Mitchell with 42. Like, that's the fireworks that these guys can bring to bear, even against two pretty good defenses. By the way, the Cavs and Knicks equal 28-17 records since January 1st, which is kind of interesting. You have them as a 4-5 matchup, so it makes sense they'd be tight, but pretty close there. Although Cleveland better in net rating and consistently one of the best teams in the NBA all season in net rating. The like sneaky matchup thing to me that I'm keeping an eye on. You mentioned Mitchell Robinson. You mentioned the front line for Cleveland with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. They're a pretty good defensive rebounding team when they've got both of their big guys on the floor, but Cleveland is not nearly as good of a defensive rebounding team as you would imagine given those two big guys. Bottom 10 in the league in defensive rebounding rate down the latter part of the season here, and getting worse as the year went on. And the Knicks, because they're not a great shooting team, that's really how they make their bones on offense. They don't turn the ball over a ton, and they hammer the offensive glass consistently near the top of the offensive rebounding rate. Mitchell Robinson leads the league in offensive rebounding rate. Hartenstein is 6th. Josh Hart is a beast off the wing on that. So if the Knicks are able to consistently generate second chance opportunities, extend possessions, it also keeps Cleveland from running, keeps Mitchell and Garland from getting out and getting into early offense. That could be sort of a leveler because it's really hard to score against Cleveland's half-court defense rather. So the Knicks are going to need more bites at the apple. They're one of the best teams in the league at generating that, and Cleveland hasn't always been good at taking that away. It's like one of the only things they're not very good at on defense. So which team is able to kind of lock down the front of the rim there, I think is going to be a huge swing factor in the series.
Emmanuel, quickly, I am also expecting to see him have a big role here, being that he's been in their closing lineup pretty much all season once they've committed to that shorter rotation. And at this juncture, I don't see a better, more consistent option to throw at either of Garland or Mitchell when the game's on the line. There's going to be a lot tasked with him there. Well,
that's kind of the interesting thing too, because now, so the Knicks have a handful of guys that you can kind of throw as a point of attack defender. There's Quickly's probably the best one. Quentin Grimes has been great at the point of attack this season. Josh Hart is another like switchable wing that can guard up and down, probably 4 positions if you need to in a given possession. But then if you're doing that late in the game, right, if you're loading up on those shorter guys to switch assignments and to lock down defensively, you're also getting smaller on the front end, right? Where does that put RJ Barrett? He's kind of like been the lost man a little bit because frankly, he hasn't played well enough to assert himself in a larger role. And Josh Hart's kind of eaten his lunch a little bit. So where does he factor into the series? And then the biggest question overall of it is, of course, the health of Julius Randle, right? He missed the last couple of weeks of the season with the ankle sprain. All NBA caliber season for him, the leading scorer on the team, and somebody that needs sort of a redemption story, given how his last postseason appearance against Atlanta went. Is he going to be able to physically, get on the court and make a difference? Are they going to be able to turn to him late in games? Jalen Brunson's been the number one clutch option for the Knicks all season long, but you need another place to go if they're able to sort of shut off his water. Randall would be that guy, and I'm not sure where else you go. Quickly, it's a lot to ask for him to be the stopper on the defensive end and the sort of release valve second creator, but that might be the situation they find themselves in if Randall's not able to go.
We knew it was coming.
We did know it was coming.
Last thing I'll say, He said RJ Barrett's been the lost man. He's been the lost $30 million man whose contract extension was loomed over the Utah Jazz as a massive bargaining chip for New York and a piece of leverage that did not go their way and maybe was a driving factor in pushing Donovan to Cleveland. So we'll see if RJ can be a factor here in this series. That's it. That's all this series. We did it. We
got through all of them.
We did it all. And I'm ready to see what comes of all the action. If you want our predictions, that's coming out Friday at Yahoo Sports. We did not make a pick really here aside from a few of these series. So if you want more of that, that's coming. This has been No Cap Room on the Ball Don't Lie Network from Yahoo Sports. We've got Good Word with Goodwill coming up on Mondays with Vinny Goodwill, our brilliant senior writer from Yahoo Sports. Special thanks to our producer, John Gennaro, behind the glass, and all the other hardworking people behind the scenes. You can follow us on Twitter for as long as it continues to exist. I'm at Jake L. Fischer. That's at your man, Devine. If you've made it this far, please subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to and leave us a 5-star review. That would be great. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, and we'd appreciate it if you came back again next week for another episode of No Cap Room.
Enjoy the playoffs, everybody.